Have you ever felt like the ground is just shaking beneath your feet? You know, when everything you've worked so hard for feels uncertain, it's really easy to question where the goodness in life is gone. So today, we're going to dive into a pretty powerful idea. What if goodness isn't something you find despite the hard times, but actually because of them? Man, this feeling is just all too real. The author of the text we're looking at was facing the potential loss of a career they'd built for over 15 years. It's a moment of crisis that so many of us can understand, right? That sinking feeling, the constant hum of anxiety, and those endless what-ifs that just keep you up at night. Okay, this right here, this is the core idea we're going to unpack. And it's a challenging thought, a little counterintuitive, because it completely flips the script on how we usually look at our struggles. Let's dig into what this actually means. So, let's kick things off with the story that sparked this whole revelation. It's a really personal crisis that ended up being the catalyst for seeing goodness in a completely new light. Just try to imagine the sheer weight of this for a second. We're talking more than a decade of your life. All the work, the sacrifices, potentially just gone. And the anxiety wasn't just a personal thing. It was everywhere, radiating from everyone involved. So right at the peak of all this fear, something shifted. Instead of spiraling further down, the author felt a prompt to do the total opposite of what fear tells you to do, to connect, to seek some spiritual guidance. And this one simple instruction led to this unexpected prayer call that drew hundreds of people, completely changing the focus from the problem to the possibility of a deeper truth. And you know, that moment of turning to prayer, it leads us straight into the core concept for this whole explainer, what's called the paradox of affliction. This is the radical, kind of mind-bending idea that hardship itself can actually be a source of good. So check out how this slide lays it out. You've got two very different paths to goodness. On the left, there's blessing. That's the goodness we all know and love, right? The stuff we find in moments of joy and triumph. But then look to the right, at affliction. This path reveals an unexpected goodness, one that's found not when you're on top of the mountain, but right in the middle of a trial. And wow, this verse just perfectly illustrates that second path. This isn't someone just, putting up with hardship. This is King David himself saying that his affliction was actually good for him. Why? Because it became a teacher. It brought him to a deeper level of understanding he wouldn't have had otherwise.
So this is what the paradox of goodness really means. It's the idea that difficult times don't erase God's goodness. Not at all. In fact, they often act like a spotlight, revealing it in ways we never would have seen when things were easy. Pain can actually become a profound teacher.
So I want you to think about your own life for a minute. When have you felt the most growth or the most clarity? When have you had that profound sense of purpose? Was it when everything was smooth sailing, or was it when you were navigating a challenge and you discovered a strength you never even knew you had? All right, this leads us to a really powerful shift in perspective. We're moving from looking for goodness out there somewhere, in our circumstances, to recognizing the goodness that is already within us.
Oh man, we all know these external storms, don't we? The job loss, the anxiety, the fear of what's next. These things are loud. They shout at us, trying to convince us that our value is completely tied to what's happening to us.
But then there's this. This is the foundational truth that stands in direct opposition to all those struggles. At the very dawn of creation, before any circumstance could ever define us, the verdict was already in. Creation, and that includes you, is very good. And here's the really powerful takeaway from that. Your inherent worth, your goodness, it's not up for debate. It doesn't go up and down with the stock market or your job title. It is a fundamental, unchanging part of who you are, period. Okay, so if this goodness is already inside us, how do we actually access it, especially when we're just filled with anxiety? Well, the answer is a practice that feels really hard, but it's incredibly powerful: surrender. Let's jump back to our author's story for a sec. They talk about being trapped in this cycle of what ifs. What if I fail? What if this doesn't work out? You know the drill. This constant worry about tomorrow is just exhausting, and it completely steals the peace and goodness that are available to us today. So this kind of breaks it down into a practical process. First, you've just got to be honest about what you're afraid of. Name those what-ifs. Then comes the really hard part. You have to release that white-knuckle grip on control and trust that there's a bigger picture at work. And doing that, it frees you up to finally embrace the present moment. And hey, this isn't some new age self-help idea. This is ancient wisdom.
Jesus himself gave this incredibly practical advice. Focus on today. Just deal with today's challenges. Tomorrow will have its own stuff to deal with, but you don't have to carry that burden right now.
And let's be really clear about this. Surrendering control is not giving up. It's an active, courageous choice to trust something greater than your own ability to manage every single outcome. Honestly, it's one of the most profound acts of strength there is.
Okay, so now let's zoom out and see how this very personal journey of finding goodness in hardship connects to a much, much bigger story and a shared purpose.
The ultimate model for all of this is, of course, the life of Jesus. His entire ministry was just a living, breathing demonstration of God's goodness in action. He didn't just talk about it, he healed people, he restored them, he fed them. He was the good news in motion.
And right before he left, Jesus passed that mission on. This is what's called the Great Commission. It's basically a call for anyone who follows him to become the hands and feet that continue this work of doing good in the world.
And this is where it all comes full circle. That very hardship you faced, that paradox of affliction you lived through, it's no longer just your story. It becomes a powerful testimony, living proof of God's goodness that you can now share with a world that desperately needs to hear it.
So we're going to end with this question, because it's not just about what you've learned here, but what you're going to do with it. Knowing that goodness is woven into you and that it can be revealed even through your trials, how are you going to take that truth and put it into action in your world right now, today?